There we go.
Okay, well, welcome again, everybody. It is my great pleasure to introduce today Marijke Kooijman. Marijke Kooijman is a PhD student at Gent University, where she works in the project decision-making processes in the letter collection of the Council of Chalcedon under the supervision of Professor Lever van Hoof. She graduated first in law at the University of Tilburg, and then in classics and ancient history at Leiden University. During her studies, she spent 1 year in Ferrara at the Faculty of Law, and later on in 2019, a term at the Royal Netherlands Institute in Rome. Last year, instead, she spent a trimester in Bamberg as a fellow resident in the ERC project, the proceeding of the Ecumenical Council from oral utterance to manuscript edition as evidence for late antique persuasion and self-representation techniques. For her current project, she studies letter collection of the Council of Chalcedon from a social, legal, and literary perspective. And amongst her publication, I would like to mention the forthcoming chapter, Godefroy and Laws of Julante Apostat, an episode in the life story of the Codices Theodosianus. Today, Marijke Kooijman will present a paper entitled Leo of God or Leo or Rome, the overt and hidden authority of the Bishop Leo of Rome in the 5th century Constantinopolitan letter collection on the Council of Chalcedon. Marijke, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and thank you so much for having me here. I will try to start my presentation now. Can I share my screen, please? Yes. Okay. Share, and then it's not a presentation yet. Just do it like this. New share. And share. And now you should all be able to see the full presentation. Yes, great. Good. I'll start then because it might be a little longer than 20 minutes. In the 50s of the 5th century, newcomer Marcian appeared on the throne of the Eastern Roman Empire. He was an outsider to the Theodosian dynasty and needed a proper background story to strengthen his authority. Partly for this reason, Marcian convened a new church council in Chalcedon in AD 451. The Council of Chalcedon produced a new definition of faith based on a doctrinal letter from Bishop Leo I of Rome to Bishop Flavian of Constantinople, also known as the Tome of Leo. Next to that, Chalcedon's Canon 28 granted judicial privileges to the See of Constantinople. After the council, Marcian published its proceedings together with related correspondence. This paper explains how the Emperor Marcian and his officials published a falsified version of a letter from Leo to underline Leo's theological authority and thus authorize Chalcedon's definition of faith, while hiding his opposition to Canon 28. In this way, Marcian exploited Leo's correspondence for his own ends. But, as I will demonstrate as well, Leo had already adapted his letter himself to suit the changed diplomatic circumstances under Emperor Marcian. Oh, forgot a slide there. Eduard Schwartz argued that the letter collections attached to the Council Acts formed so-called publizistische Sammlungen. They created a narrative that would impact the reader's perception of the Council of Chalcedon. My research investigates the publicistic narrative of what Schwartz named Collection M, a collection of 17 Greek letters, most of which were translated from the Latin. These letters precede the Council Acts of Chalcedon in manuscripts M, P, and S, dating from the 11th to 13th century. Apart from the Chalcedonian letter collections, the Constantinopolitan Codex M, or Codex Venetus 555, in full, only contains the Greek Council Acts of Chalcedon. The Eastern manuscripts P and S, or the Codex Parisinus 415 and the Codex Sinaiticus 1690, are canonical collections to which were added collection M and a part of Chalcedon's first council session. Schwartz identifies the last 5 letters, M13 to M17, as a later addition because they also precede the first session of Chalcedon as a separate collection in the 12th century Codex B, or Codex Vindobonensis Historia Graecae 27. In the 16th century, Codex B was brought to Vienna by a deputy of the Austrian Emperor Maximilian II, who had bought it in Constantinople. Just like Codex M, Codex B comprises the full Council Acts of Chalcedon and several Chalcedonian letter collections. Letter M12 is the more extensive version of M1. In Schwartz's view, it was added to the end of the original collection M because letter M1 had already been written down and could not be recovered. The original collection, which only comprised letters M1 to M11, was created between AD 453 and 455 and attached as an introduction to the Greek Council Acts of Chalcedon. In this paper, I focus on one particular letter from Leo to Marcian's predecessor, the Emperor Theodosius II, sent on October 13, 449. The Greek translation of this letter appears twice in collection M, in an abbreviated version as letter M1 and as letter M12 in its original longer version. The Latin originals of both letters can be found as numbers 18 and 25 in the Collectio Germanica, a chronologically ordered collection of 104 letters sent by Bishop Leo. According to Schwartz, the Collectio Germanica was copied in the 9th century from 4 6th century manuscripts then present in Verona, which defended Leo's orthodoxy during the 3-chapter controversy. It is only extant in one manuscript, Paris, Bibliothèque Mazarine, 1645, which dates from the 9th or 10th century. For your understanding, the Grimani letters 90 to 24 are all letters from Leo on the same subject, and sent on the same date to other Eastern recipients. Contrary to Schwartz, I argue that letter M1 was not adapted purely against Leo. Although the altered letter concealed Leo's claim to handle appeals from Eastern bishops, it upheld Leo's theological authority. Thus, the original letter collection M focused on Leo's importance as a representative of God, instead of Rome's primacy over Constantinople. Moreover, since the abbreviated version also has a Latin original, it must have been abbreviated by Leo and sent to Constantinople, possibly at the occasion of the Council of Chalcedon. My argument then is twofold. First of all, Leo adapted his own letter to suit his goals under the new reign of the Emperor Marcian. And secondly, the attachment to his letter was altered only to limit Leo's judicial authority. Thus, the transmission history of Leo's letter to Theodosius demonstrates how the diplomatic goals of Leo and Marcian, even though they disagreed on a crucial detail, were remarkably similar. In the next 15 minutes or so, I will explain my argument in 3 steps. First, I will give a short overview of the contents and rhetoric of Leo's letter. Secondly, I will compare the 4 versions of this letter, explaining their differences and origin. Thirdly, and most importantly, I will discuss how Leo's attachment to his letter in the Greek shortened version was blatantly falsified, which led to a reversal of its meaning. In conclusion, I will use my findings to nuance our view on the diplomatic relationship between Marcian and Leo. On October 13, 449, Leo asked Theodosius for a new church council that would undo the Second Council of Ephesus, which had been held 2 months earlier. Ephesus too had condemned Bishop Flavian of Constantinople, who had sent a written appeal to Leo. Leo's request to Theodosius was twofold. First, the emperor should annul the decisions of Ephesus too, and secondly, he should convene a new general council in Italy. Leo's reasoning comes down to the following. Leo received his authority from the Apostle Peter and from God. Theodosius, on the other hand, was a layman and therefore dependent on Leo's intervention with divine providence. Next to reminding Theodosius of his dependence on God's servants, Leo used juridical proof to substantiate his power claim. First of all, his delegates had opposed the judgment at the Second Council of Ephesus. Secondly, Bishop Flavian, who was condemned by this council, had sent a written appeal, a libellus appellationis, to Leo. And thirdly, the decrees of the canons held in Nicaea, Canonum Nicaeae Habitorum Decreta, granted the Apostolic See the right of appeal. I will come back to these so-called decrees of Nicaea in a few minutes. But first, I would like to discuss the differences between the full versions of Leo's letter to Theodosius. As mentioned before, both the long and the shortened version of Leo's letter were originally written in Latin. Nevertheless, only the Greek translation of the shortened letter, which is letter M1, still includes the version of the canon which Leo attached to the longer letter, but likely also to the shortened one since its Greek translation preserved it. As said, however, I will save the best for last and start with an analysis of the letter itself. Grimani number 18 counts 656 words without the date, whereas its shortened twin, Grimani number 25, has been reduced to 494 words. Grimani number 25 not only deleted more than a quarter of the original, but also rewrote its introduction. Originally, Leo started by thanking Theodosius for an earlier letter, lauding the emperor for the defense of truth and peace through you, and referring to the suppression of Leo's term at the Second Council of Ephesus. Grimani 25 omitted this lament and replaced the compliments to Theodosius with a strong statement of Leo's authority. And I quote, "Long ago and from the beginning, we felt so much trust in the celebrated counsels from the blessed Peter, the first of the apostles, that we have the authority, habeamus auctoritatem, to defend the truth for our peace." Most omissions of Grimani 25, but not all of them, also downplay the authority of Theodosius. In my view, the transformation of Grimani number 18 to its little brother number 25 can be explained by the changed political climate, which led to the Council of Chalcedon in AD 451. For months after the Second Council of Ephesus, Leo was still lobbying for a new council, but Theodosius kept saying no. However, in the summer of AD 450, the emperor fell off his horse and died. Nobody could have foreseen that Theodosius took his theological policy to the grave. Now his older sister Pulcheria, a pious supporter of Bishop Leo, returned from her monastery to the political center. She married a domesticus of the influential Germanic general Aspar, Marcian, who became the next emperor. Together, Marcian and Pulcheria immediately started to reverse the ecclesiastical policy of Theodosius. In September 450, Marcian sent a letter to Leo announcing his accession to the throne and his intention to hold a new church council. This would eventually lead to the Council of Chalcedon, which was presided over by imperial officials and even attended by the imperial couple, when the new definition was solemnly confirmed. Leo was not personally present at the council, but instead sent well-informed representatives who also carried a bundle of documents and Leo's written instructions. My hypothesis is that Leo altered his letter to Theodosius for this occasion. In the context of Chalcedon, it was meant to underline the seniority of Leo's request for a new council and Leo's authority to judge the case of Flavian, who by now had already passed away. What it should not do was to celebrate the authority of the previous emperor, since the new Emperor Marcian had chosen to support Theodosius's theological opponents. Therefore, Leo adapted his letter so that it would function in the changed context of the Council of Chalcedon. The Greek translation of both letters was made in the years after Chalcedon, when Marcian decided to publish its proceedings, partly due to the fierce opposition to Chalcedon in the east. Possibly, his officials simply copied Leo's Chalcedonian dossier and added letter M12 from the imperial archive, but I cannot expand this argument due to the time restriction. Whatever the case, letter M12 was a faithful translation of Leo's original letter to Theodosius. Basically, it only simplified some Latin constructions, most of all the dependent clauses. The same goes for letter M1. It was a more or less literal rendering of Grammani number 25. Notably, where Grammani 25 overlaps with Grammani 18, and this M1 would overlap with M12, M1 provides its own translation from the Latin. Overall, the translation of M1 uses clearer constructions and simpler words that I suspect were more common to Leo's and Marcian's contemporaries than the Greek of letter M12. For example, M12 translates cognovimus, we learned, with me matercamen, where M1 opts for egnomen. With my fellow bishops, cum consacerdotibus meis, is rendered as metaton suleturgon mu in M12, but as metaton sunemoi episcopon in M1. Could it be that M12 was only added to the collection later, when other words had become common, or the knowledge of Latin in Constantinople had decreased? More research is needed here, and I would love to hear your suggestions during the discussion. For now, I will present to you the intriguing story of Leo's attachment to his letter, which was alluded to in the longer original, but only survived under letter M1. What Leo attached to his letter as a canon from the famous and widely accepted Council of Nicaea of AD 325 was actually the fourth canon of the Council of Sardica of AD 342. According to the fourth canon of Sardica, a new bishop could not be consecrated while an appeal to the Roman bishop was still hanging. Originally, it read as follows. When any bishop will have been deposed by the judgment of those bishops who abide in the neighboring places, and when he will have clamored in defense that he should handle his case in the city of Rome, in Urbe Roma, on the same chair after the appeal of him who seemed to be deposed, another bishop may in no way be ordained in place of himself, until the case will have been determined by the judgment of the Roman bishop, Judicio Romani Episcopi. In Letter Collection M, Leo's attachment was reduced to nonsense. Its Greek translation concealed the words in the city of Rome and, by the judgment of a Roman bishop, in the following ungrammatical phrase. Whenever some bishop is condemned by a judgment of bishops, and he has affirmed by a certain protest that the matter of his case should be transferred to Adrianople, and paradise on canon, the other bishop installed on the chair after the demand of him who seemed to be condemned, the matter of the case can absolutely not be ordained in another place, if he has not received the decision from the judges of that place. Para ton e caise criton. Instead of Rome, the translators wrote Adrianople, and the second half of the sentence was transformed in such a way that no sense could be made of it. As Professor Tornau explained to me, the misconstruction of the Greek could be due to the fact that the translator simply misunderstood the Latin construction. According to him, according to him, the crucial error of the translator was to add the Greek coordinating participle de, where in the Latin the main clause started. Thus, the main clause of the sentence shifted to the phrase omnino non ordinator loco ipsius, or may in no way be ordained in place of himself, which lacked a subject. As a substitute, the translator added ta tu pragmatos, the matter of the case, as a subject, and consequently translated ordinator loco ipsius as en hetero topoi tu potenai, which means to be decided in another place. According to Tornau, the translator, and I quote, simply did not understand the phrase and took this as a chance to introduce another obstacle to non-Eastern ecclesiastical jurisdiction. Indeed, this misunderstanding gave the translator the opportunity to stipulate that the case of a condemned bishop could not be handled somewhere else, implying by this the city of Rome. Thus, the Greek falsification of Sardica came to mean the exact opposite of its Latin original. It expressly forbade appeals to Rome. The Greek falsification was meant to hide two inconvenient implications of Canon 4. Primarily, it meant that Theodosius could not ordain a new bishop of Constantinople until Leo's new church council had decided on Flavian's appeal. However, Theodosius did consecrate the new bishop Anatolius, who remained in his position under the Emperor Marcian. In fact, Leo only accepted his new colleague after Anatolius had subscribed to his tome, under the pressure of the new imperial couple at the end of AD 450. Next to that, The Council of Chalcedon had also produced a canon which granted Constantinople the authority to consecrate metropolitan bishops in the Pontic, Asian, and Thracian dioceses. This canon, number 28, caused much resentment in Rome, so much that at first Leo did not even subscribe to the Council of Chalcedon. Only after continuing diplomatic pressure from Constantinople, Leo finally dispatched an official recognition of Chalcedon on March 21, 453. But he still objected to Canon 28. Leo regarded this canon as the result of Anatolius' personal ambition, and he refused to write to his colleague until May 454. If Marcian, who ordered for the compilation of Collection M, accepted the fourth canon of Sardica, this would have greatly diminished the power of Canon 28, because then the consecration of a new bishop by the bishopric of Constantinople could be halted by sending an appeal to Rome. First of all, then, the compilers of Collection M did not want to contradict Canon 28 of Chalcedon, or imply any opposition from Leo to this canon. Secondly, it was not in their interest to leave traces of Leo's difficulties with Bishop Anatolius of Constantinople. The compilers falsified the attachment to letter M1, so that Bishop Leo could be presented as an enthusiastic supporter of Marcian, Anatolius, and all canons of the Council of Chalcedon. In conclusion, Collection M presented a story that increased the legitimacy of the Council of Chalcedon and the Emperor Marcian. Though celebrating the centrality of Bishop Leo of Rome to Marcian's theological policy, the collection attempted to hide the fact that Leo had based his theological interference in the East on Rome's judicial authority, which potentially undermined Chalcedon's Canon 28 and the legitimacy of Bishop Anatolius of Constantinople. It was shaped in such a way that its emphasis lay on Leo's theological contribution, instead of his judicial power in the East. Thus, Marcian hoped to gain more support for Chalcedon in the rebellious East and create a firmer basis for his own authority as an emperor. Marcian was only connected to the Theodosian dynasty by marriage, but thanks to Chalcedon, he could boast a pious continuation of Constantine's legacy. Unlike his predecessor Theodosius II, Marcian safeguarded the tradition of the Christian faith. Thus, Collection M as a whole exploited Leo's legitimizing function for the decision of an emperor who did not possess any dynastic roots for reigning over the Eastern Roman Empire. However, as my comparison of the two Latin versions of Leo's letter to Theodosius has shown, Leo also consciously changed his tone under the reign of Marcian. He erased the bits where he had been lauding the faith of the previous emperor, and instead created space for his own authority under the new ruler. Hence, Leo was not just a puppet in the hands of Marcian and Pulcheria, but rather their brother in faith, or should I say, their partner in crime. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for a very interesting paper about a very strange episode in the history of council letters and reworking of not too marginal documents in the letters of the Pope. We're inviting now any questions or comments of any kind. I'll start with my curiosity from the beginning. did I get correctly that both the collection of letters circulated as one corpus, both the abbreviated form and the non-abbreviated form, you get the transmission of that in manuscripts of them, even though they contradict themselves?
Yes, indeed. So Schwartz has his theory that the first 11 letters were a separate collection, exactly because letter 12 is the original of letter M1. So it must have circulated separately, but at some point, someone inserted letter M12. And for me, it's a big question who did this and also why he did this. So if you have ideas, I would love to.
I don't know. I've seen this sort of collection that get interpolated, but the examples that I have in mind are not contradictory from one item to another in such an obvious way and on such central points. I don't know. Archivist, somebody who's very happy to collect. Let's document everything like we do, basically. That sort of situation. Mara, please. Very interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, I have a follow-up question, actually, exactly on the same topic. Marijke, thank you very much for this paper. It was very fascinating. But I have a question. How do we know which letter is the original, and which one is the abridgment, which one is the one to which has been added material? I mean, my question comes out of the fact that I've never worked on epistolary collections. So it's genuine curiosity. Why do we say that one letter is the original and the other one is the counterfeit, so to speak?
That's a very good question. I think most reasons just come from the contents of the letters. So the longer version reacts to a letter from Theodosius, which would be quite a normal reaction if it was a real letter, if it was really in the part of a correspondence, whereas the other states with this big power claim, which is not very common for a bishop to do when he starts writing a letter to an emperor. Then the longer version, the longer Latin version, also says that it attaches something, the canons of Nicaea, or one canon. And then the attachment hasn't been preserved. But the shorter version doesn't mention this. And then the Greek translation does attach something. So that would, if you can still follow, I would say that for that reason, the longer one is original because there is an attachment, and the longer one actually announces it. But those are the only two. Yeah. And reasoning vice versa, I cannot imagine someone adding parts on the authority of Theodosius later on, because it wouldn't make sense, I think. Okay. Those are the first things that come to mind.
No, it makes sense. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madalena, please.
Well, thank you very much, Marijke. That's very fascinating. So, I have a question out of curiosity. Are all the, I think you said 12 letters from the collection relevant? I mean, I don't understand that some letters are directly relevant to the concerns of the council, but are all the letters relevant? Because I've seen also situations in which we actually have no idea why some letters are integrated in, this type of collections. How is in this situation?
Thank you. Yes, in this case, they are all introductory letters to the Council of Chalcedon. I could, if I'm quick, I might share a slide with you where the whole, if I'm quick enough, wait. Oh.
Go ahead.
Oh, this is very strange. Okay, I won't share a slide with you because my cursor seems to disappear. But the first 12 letters are pre-conciliar, and it starts with Leo asking Theodosius for a new council. Then Leo, and this is, I think it's by far my favorite part of the whole letter collections. The Western imperial family, at a certain point, they visited Rome on the Saint's Day of St. Peter, 22 February 450. And then Leo came with a big crowd of bishops, and he fell on his knees and he tearfully implored the Western imperial family to also write to Theodosius. So we have some examples of family correspondence, writing to their nephew, their father, or her father and a cousin, all asking Theodosius for this council. Then letters, I think 5, 6, and 7 in collection M are Theodosius's answers. Theodosius says no, there will be no council. And then we have letters from Marcian announcing the new council. So there's a really clear contradiction between Theodosius and then Marcian. And the collection ends, or letter M11 is actually Leo's term, which will be confirmed at the Council of Chalcedon. So it's all very clearly connected. And then M13 to M17, so the second part, which has been added later probably, are post-conciliar correspondence. So it's all laws from the Emperor Marcian confirming the decrees of Chalcedon. So it's, yes, in this case, it's all quite closely.
So you can see a very, very clear rationale behind all the arrangement of the, yeah, okay.
Definitely, yes.
Andy has a question. I didn't see somebody else.
Go on if you wanted to add
means,
something. Okay.
add.
I was, because I'm not entirely sure, I was thinking about this combination of these two collections and this new, well, it's a Greek translation, so of an original version. Do you know when this translation was made? Is it equally early and then transmitted, or are you arguing that it's a later translation added later? Because of course the manuscripts are very late. So is there any way to kind of date the difference between these translations? Or I was thinking specifically of course, you have a much later period of these polemics between the West and East. Is it connected to that in a way, or is it just simply a much earlier collection that is transmitted in just very late manuscripts?
So the letters M1 to M11 have been translated, or at least have been included in their Greek translation to the Council Acts between 453 and 455. According to Schwartz, and he argues from the subtitles. So every heading above the letters, especially those of the Western imperial family, they say whether or not those imperial members were still alive or not. So sometimes it says Pulcheria of holy memory. So she was already dead, so it must have been, it's not exactly that though, but it's like between the, this is why Schwartz could say, okay, it's definitely between those two dates, so very close to the Council of Chalcedon actually. He doesn't do this for letter M12. And well, Schwartz argues for the whole letter collection M. So M1 to M17, he says that this whole translation has been made close to the Council of Chalcedon when it was very important for Marcian to defend his council, because in the East everything was going wrong. Bishops were murdered. Nobody liked Chalcedon. So So he had to defend it in the years directly afterwards. But I find it quite strange that letter M12 has such different Greek wording, and then I'm really sorry not to be an expert at all of this late Greek. It could be argued that that one has been translated later. Yes, but I wouldn't know when it was inserted. And then for the Latin letters, well, since they both have been translated around the Council of Chalcedon, they both must have been sent to Constantinople around 450, 451. But they survive in a compilation from 6th century manuscripts, the Collectio Germanica. And Schwartz argues that that compilation, which consists only of Leo's letters, was made in Italy during the 3-chapter controversy, so in the 6th century. So there was this reuse of letter collections for theological controversies throughout the ages, which makes it ever more interesting, of course. Yeah, I hope this answers your question, or maybe you have some ideas on it as well.
Alison, please.
Hi, Marijke. Thanks so much. This is also just really useful to me because I'm also trying to work my way through this, these collections, especially from the perspective of bilingualism. And I have 2 questions. One is there any sort of contemporary sort of annoyance on the part of Western people that the 2 versions are different and that the Greek has the Greek translations have elided the primacy of Rome? Do we see sort of contemporary people commenting on the fact that whatever the motivations of the translation, the Greek version does change some things? So do we see anyone sort of commenting on that's been changed? Because maybe that will help you date. If there's contemporary comment, maybe it means that the second Greek version was early. And then just a different question out of curiosity that you just said, the 6th century compilation in Italy, did that just include the Latin stuff, or did that include the Greek translations as well, or was it just the Latin versions? But thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, I'll start with the second question. That was a Latin compilation, so no Greek in the Collectio Germanica.
Oh, darn.
Yes, indeed. No bilingualism. Yes, and then on the contemporary comments, well, I'm not sure if any Western bishop ever saw that falsified canon of Sardica. I think not, actually. It circulated in the East. Everything that circulated in the West was Latin. There were early Latin translations made of some letters, also for Bishop Leo and under Bishop Leo. And then, I should say this correctly, I think in the 6th century as well, a big Latin translation, a big translation project of the whole Council of Chalcedon was undertaken, and that was also in the context of the 3 chapters controversy. Yes, I should have looked this up before. And there, okay, this is how do I say this easily? So there was also a Latin version of M1 and M12 in the new 6th century translation. So we have the Collectio Germanica with what I would say the originals, because they always stayed in Italy. It was made in Italy. And then there's this big Latin translation project of the Council X plus the Latin collections in the 6th century, which also included translations either retranslations from the Greek, but I think they just kept the Latin originals. Also because, and I forgot to mention that, and that would be interesting for you maybe, in the letter collection M, originally the Latin originals were also present, because we have some little subtitles saying, from the Latin, this is the Greek translation. And then we only have the Greek translation. So probably the Latin translators from the 6th century just left out the Greek and kept the Latin originals.
Right. Okay. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks.
Sorry, I hope I should have made this visual in some way.
No, it's really helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, yeah.
Georgia, please.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. This was fascinating, and you have a lot of interesting material in your hands. Just to follow up on the Council of Sardica, just to understand whether I understood actually. So this falsified version, we have it only attached to M1, right? We don't have it anywhere else. And that can be an argument, maybe, because you show very well why we could think that the translator was misinterpreting. So just to further ask, we have no indication whatsoever that the translator had a different Latin. Thank you.
That's a perfect question. Thank you. And I forgot to mention that. Yeah, so I am following Schwartz's reasoning, who says that the falsification was entirely due to the Greek translator, but we don't have the Latin original, which could have been falsified as well, indeed. It could have been a Latin falsification. I don't see why. I don't think it's very plausible given the circumstances, but it could have been, yes. I'm not sure if I can get closer to certainty than that. But, yeah, thank you.
I'm also curious. So again, in this example of a different epistolary corpus that I have in mind, you have both abbreviated reduction, short reduction, and a longer recension, interpolated, and both of them they do not belong to the historical context in which the initial letters were written. But in what you're describing, so they are entirely a matter of reception. Some of them even medieval. This is early Christian corpus. Some of them are still writing extra letters on top, medieval in different Latin. These letters were in Greek. But in the letter that for which you have one version and an abbreviated recension, can both be seen in the same historical context, or can you argue for the one that you think it's redacted, that they belong to a different reception perspective, somebody trying to rethink of the past? I sense it's a bit different there. That's why I'm asking. And another thing, you focus here on one letter and its corresponding abbreviation. Is that happening in the corpus with other letters? Because you have the 12, M1 to 12, and then you have the other ones, M12, 13 to 17. You showed in the first slide. Do you have correspondences like that, like abbreviated form of another? Can you this is the only one that's like that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is the only one, the only double within one collection, of course. And when you asked, about the different contexts, well, so the abbreviation and the adaptation of letter M1 can be explained in a new context of the Emperor Marcian, I think, because everything that has been, well, almost everything, and that's the tricky part, but everything that has been left out about Theodosius is like Leo saying like, oh, the equity of your laws, and I'm sure that as long as you are reigning, the unity of the church will be preserved. Well, that's a bit outdated after Theodosius died and Marcian switched the policy. so that is quite clearly, and one is quite clearly functional under the reign of Marcian, and 12 is just literally the original. At least that's what I argue. So it gives much more space for Theodosius. And this, well, of course, this functioned while Theodosius was still alive. So M12 could also have been translated into Greek during the reign of Theodosius. Maybe Leo sent his letter in Latin, probably, and someone already translated it to Greek by that time and then put it in the archive. That could be. Or Leo sent M12, or, well, Epistola 18, to Theodosius. It was kept in the archive. And then later on, someone thought it was, well, someone noticed the similarity with M1, thought, okay, well, I have the original. I should translate it and insert it. And then indeed, maybe just an enthusiastic archivist who thought, this is the original, let's add to it, because I don't really see what function M12 could have in a political context after Theodosius had died. He never became popular again. So yeah, so that's those are my thoughts, I think.
It's very interesting. It's a bit of a mess you have on your hands, but it's very interesting.
That's partly what I love about it, yes.
Yeah, this is why we go to these places. If anybody else would like to react in any way, we're very welcome. Otherwise, I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking Marijke for a very good paper and a very interesting conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks everyone for joining in. And we'll be seeing you all the next time.